every last Tuesday in the month at now 11 GMT or Universal Time at 1 o'clock Geneva time. We gather to summarize the major developments during the previous month, during the month of March. We can see spring is coming. It's lovely weather here in Geneva. I guess it is also in your respective countries and cities worldwide. We have the new dynamism in digital policy, and as you will see, it was quite an interesting and busy month. And as always, you can consult Internet Governance Barometer for the last month. You can find data about major categories and major developments with the indications if the pressure was the same or there was increase or decrease of the pressure on issues like global IG architecture, security, e-commerce, digital rights, jurisdiction, net neutrality, with detailed events supporting our findings about the increase or decrease of pressure in this field. We'll proceed in our regular way. We will go through we'll select 5 trends out of all of these developments that you can consult here and in the monthly brief, in the barometer page, or on our website. We'll select 5 major trends. We'll also do the summary of the major events that are ahead of us in April. Therefore, you can use it for planning purposes. We will now move with the first main events in March. As you can see, there is a quite detailed summary events. We won't be going through all of them, but it can show you quite a busy month with quite a few activities on the issues related to data privacy protection and data management. We'll focus in particular on this issue, which is emerging as important issue in overall digital policy. Next slide. Here is the summary of the barometer, which you can download it either online or you can have it, or you have it in front of you here in the room. Next slide. We'll move to the 5 trends. Okay, next. We'll now go to 5 top trends in digital policy during the last month. The month started with the announcement of the Chinese cyber diplomacy, or the foreign policy of China, on the 1st of March. Chinese authorities announced their basically digital foreign policy. It is important event because for the first time China put in one document all major principles and priorities of their digital foreign policy, or if you can call it cyber diplomacy. It is also useful for confidence building in foreign relations because now international actors know exactly what is the Chinese position on various issues. When it comes to substance, apart from the codification of the major issue, when it comes to substance, there are no major surprises. China on the political side argues for cyber sovereignty, therefore the ultimate right of the Chinese government to decide on the cyber policy within its territory. And in economic field, it is very proactive for the further digital integration. Therefore, those are 2 pillars of Chinese digital policy which have been developing for last 5 or even more 10 years. Then there are other details. It was very interesting. As you know, devil is always in detail. China supports a multilateral approach with regard to which is intergovernmental approach to digital policy, but they introduced new term which is multi-party. It was first introduced during the one speech at the Wujian conference, and it's now repeated in the foreign policy document. Multi-party is in a way a softer version of multi-stakeholder. As you know, that China is not a strong supporter, to put it mildly, of multi-stakeholder approach, but multi-party indicates basically the same players that you have in multi-stakeholder approach. Therefore, this is the open door for involvement of other actors in addition to the governments. Chinese main policy is the governments in multilateral fora should negotiate and discuss and adopt legal instruments on digital policy. But through this multi-party approach, there is opening for the participation of different actors, mainly what is clear in document, participation of different actors, other actors, according to their respective roles and responsibilities. Therefore, they're basing it on the WSIS, World Summit on Information Society, Tunis agenda, which specified that other actors, academia, civil society, business, should participate within their respective roles and responsibilities. This is a Chinese approach, which is reiterated. The slight innovation is multi-parties approach. They then recommend basic resources should be equitably distributed and critical infrastructure should be managed jointly. Still slight criticism of the current status of ICANN. While China is involved in the ICANN processes, it involves in the Government Advisory Council, it still thinks that there are some issues that should be addressed, especially related to jurisdiction. And it indicates that ICANN still needs to be a truly independent international institution. This was the first not that visible trend which marked the beginning of the month of the 1st of March. Second, next slide. Second was much more visible in the media was the WikiLeaks release of the CIA so-called Vault 7, 8,000 pages of confidential documents of the US government, CIA, dated between 2013 and 2016. The underlying issue, the underlying criticism which came and which was revealed with this release is that CIA has not been informing the software producer and the hardware producer, internet industry, about so-called weaknesses in their products, backdoors, security threats, and other elements which they then they first detected and they use it as a backdoor. This was the major criticism which started quite a few media articles, heavy media coverage, criticism by civil society and other actors, which basically undermines the overall cyber security, cyber stability worldwide if those weaknesses in the applications have not been reported to the producer, which is general practice that in particular governments as a protector of the public interest should do. There are other details, but I would say this is the underlying point, that CIA has not been reporting the weaknesses, in particular in the software application, to the producer, and in a way, leaving it open for possible hackers, cyber criminals, and other actors. Next. The third element, the third trend was continuation of the, we can call it digital treaty trend, which started with Microsoft's proposal to have Geneva Digital Convention. In February, we discussed it during the last month briefing. I will just remind you that Microsoft basically proposed adoption of the Geneva Digital Convention in very mixed, with very mixed arguments, arguing basically for human rights angle, protection of the users, but ultimately basically arguing for the responsibility of governments to protect critical infrastructure, including infrastructure run by companies such as Microsoft. Now we have the second mentioning of the treaty by the UN Special Rapporteur for Privacy. He proposed the adoption of a surveillance treaty, which will basically limit the surveillance rights and possibilities for the governments worldwide. As you know, the espionage per se is not legally prohibited. International law doesn't prevent the use of espionage as one of the tools of foreign policy. But the question is when espionage is moved to the other forms like mass surveillance, which is not allowed according to privacy rules. The special rapporteur on the privacy rights basically sent the message that current legal instruments, including UN conventions, including Covenant, are not sufficient to prevent surveillance, and he argued that there is a need to adopt surveillance treaty. After the Digital Geneva Convention, now we have surveillance treaty. There is a momentum, more and more actors from different corners, from the private sector, not through the traditional government angle, from private sector, now from the, let's say, academia, civil society, UN Special Rapporteur, are basically asking for the treaty that will regulate, in particular, questions related to security, data, and surveillance. This is the third major trend in March, which is continuation from the previous trend in February. Next. One more detailed, legally detailed, but equally important developments was essentially requested by EU, by European Union Consumer Association and DG Connect, European Union Commission, a request for the social media companies, in particular Facebook, Google, and Twitter, to change their agreements that we adopt when we click I agree, and we rarely read the small print. And they basically requested in the letter in November 2016, they asked those major three companies to adapt their regulation and their standard agreements to the European consumer, in particular consumer protection rights, also e-commerce regulation, but in particular consumer protection rights. Well, they met on the 16th of March, and the conclusion is that internet companies have to provide concrete solution within 1 month. European Commission for Justice gave them 1 month to provide concrete solution, in particular to the question of jurisdiction. And she argued during the press conference that it is unfair that consumers in Europe have to use courts in California in order to protect their rights. According to Rome I Convention, according to European legislation, consumers, if they're not involved in professional activities, therefore the users, they have the right to use jurisdiction when they are located. Therefore, let's say, we in Switzerland, we should be able to initiate the court cases to protect our rights against the big internet companies by using Swiss courts, not by going to California. This is relatively, let's say, very legalistic, not reported in the media, but this is the development which could have the major impact on the internet industry and data protection and the other issues. And we will be following it carefully. There are other elements. Jurisdiction is the first one. The second one is misleading context and the question of termination of contracts. Basically, European authorities argue that it is unfair that internet companies can terminate a contract without, there is no equality in rights between internet companies and users. They can terminate, as we know, their contracts or the condition in the contract almost unilaterally without any consultations with the users. This is, let's say, strategic, fundamental, more substantive change which will affect internet industry over the next few months, especially after this month when we hear what internet companies will propose as a solution. European Union has chosen gradual approach. They wrote a letter in November. They gathered with internet companies on 16th of March. And now they are giving them 1 month, and the Eurocova, the Commissioner for Justice, she basically indicated if there is no solution, then they will use their other legal means and regulatory means in order to force internet companies to obey the European consumer protection law. Next. The fifth main trend is related to ICANN. ICANN made a major shift in Copenhagen meeting in their discussion and focus from previous discussion mainly on question of transition. Now they return to their, in a way, core business, the question of policy. And there were a few issues related how to improve next round of generic TLDs, mechanism for distributing resources accrued from the GTLD auction. There we're speaking about few $100 million, which should be somehow used by ICANN for capacity building or for other activities. Therefore, it wasn't particularly exciting meeting, if you can call it, comparing to the previous ICANN meetings. There were a lot of fireworks, policy debates and policy discussions. There were a few controversies, but the major shift was from the transition discussion towards discussion on the major, on the future policy of ICANN. There are many open issues. There is, for example, issues where governments were particularly unhappy. It's use of the government domains in the generic TLDs. For example, there was some sort of ban that government's domains .ch cannot be used, for example, for registration ch.doctors or ch.lawyers. and that ban was removed under the pressure of the registers. ICANN board removed that ban. Therefore, there is now possibility to use the country domains for registration in the generic top-level domains. It's always confusing to use this terminology. We'll come to this point in discussion. Peter was in Copenhagen, and he will update us on this development. We'll be moving now to the next slide, and basically indication about main developments, what is ahead of us in April. We have are in meeting Americans registers in the US. We have an interesting meeting in Geneva on Knowledge for Development Global Partnership Conference here at the UN campus, bringing UN knowledge management community. If you have been in this field, let's say 15-20 years ago, Richard can recall it. Knowledge management was the buzzword. Everybody was speaking about knowledge management. It went under the radar, but it is now re-emerging in more, let's say, more reasonable way. What at that time the buzz was that you can codify knowledge in the computer system and databases. Now it's re-emerging as an issue, and there will be knowledge management community coming to Geneva to discuss question of data, information, knowledge. Worldwide Web Conference in Perth, interregional conference between OSCE and Asia partners on cyber and ICT security in Seoul. Our colleague Vlada Radunovic will speak at the Seoul conference. G20 meeting of digital ministers in Düsseldorf between 6th and 7th of April. There is an interesting development around G20, as you may know, and I think we mentioned Germany tried to push digital agenda, in particular digital economic agenda, during the G20 presidency, and this meeting will be important meeting in this context. There has been some advancements and some setbacks, including discussion, should it be called by G20 members, should this field be called e-commerce, digital trade, or digital commerce, or online trade, but major controversies between e-commerce and digital trade. And that's we can reflect later on it, but it will be important event. Then there will be meeting on the Russian Internet Governance Forum in Innopolis, which is a new innovation city in the where is the republic, Russian Republic, where the capital is Kazan? Could somebody help me with it's not Turkmenistan, it starts with a T, but it is one of the Russian republics with where they developed the new city, ICT, Tatarstan. Thank you. In Tatarstan, where they developed the new innovation city, Innopolis. Then there will be Internet of Things European Summit in Brussels, Finnish Internet Governance Forum, Garmisch Forum 2017, usually focusing on cybersecurity issues. And in Geneva, at the end of the month, we'll have UNCTAD e-commerce week between 24th and 28th. The dynamism is picking up. April will be in Geneva relatively quiet comparing to May and June. In May and June, we'll have really many activities related to, including VERSIS Forum, CSTD, ITU meeting on the artificial intelligence for good, but we'll be keeping you updated on these developments. Well, this is more or less I guess we have update from GIP. Yes. From the GIP and the Diplo Foundation, past events were just-in-time course on internet governance, which we finished yesterday. You know that we run every year for the newly appointed diplomats and the international officials, Introduction to Internet Governance. We completed this course yesterday. We had quite intensive thematic reporting from ICANN 58 and detailed with, I think, 25 reports from different sessions at ICANN 58. You have ongoing is Digital Geneva 2017, how data is shaping our future. As you know, there will be Internet Governance Forum at the end of the year here in Geneva, and we selected data focus as the main build-up focus and main thread throughout the year till Internet Governance Forum. Therefore, we'll be having quite a few activities focusing on data, governance of data, policy around data, human rights, security aspects, and other aspects of data. In April-May, we'll have a training for new assistant curators, people who are basically keeping this GAP Digital Watch updated. We have the community of people worldwide who are following 41 issue and writing updates on the jurisdiction, trade, human rights, and other issues. And we'll have a course on digital commerce starting during for diplomats here based in Geneva. Therefore, you're welcome to join us. In the preparation for the WTO negotiation in Buenos Aires. Therefore, we'll be trying to provide just-in-time course on digital commerce. The title is a bit controversial. We call it digital trade, but then there is a controversy about the title itself. Therefore, we choose digital commerce now, which sounds a bit strange. And on 25th of April, we'll have our regular monthly briefing with the update on developments in April. This is more or less all from our side about the major developments in March and what is ahead of us in April. Now we have we'll break tradition of having a first comments from Richard Hill. Peter, you will have now this. I'll give you priority to you, please.
I'm sorry, Richard. I break the tradition. Just a minor thing about the second level. In the domain names where we have the country codes. It was a controversial issue, and the GAC, which is the Governmental Advisory Committee of the ICANN, gave an advice to the board not to take any decision on this issue. There were countries which had concerns about using the country codes on the second level, and there are some countries which do not. And the board took the position that the country codes aren't owned by the countries. They have been allocated by ISO, the International Standards Organization, and they can be used without any further ado. There was a board GAC meeting when the issue was raised, and apparently the GAC was very rigid on this issue, or some board members were very rigid on this issue, and but it was clear that there should be more negotiations, and the GAC reiterated its advice on the second level, saying that the board should stop allocating or delegating rather the country codes on the second level, and until there is some agreement on this issue. So basically, some countries have concerns, other countries do not, and probably we should also consider the countries which do have concerns.
Thank you, Peter. Just to recontextualize discussion. Discussion is a quite fundamental discussion around the issue if domain name as such, any domain name, is property or not. There are arguments, we won't go into this direction. Therefore, if, for example, our domain name diplomacy.edu is a property of Diplo Foundation or not. If domain that you registered is your property or not. There are the arguments for and against. And then, therefore, I would say the ICANN and registrars are focusing mainly on the issue that it is not property. But there are some arguments this is a property because it can be part of your assets. One can generate income from that if it is the financial operation. Therefore, this is open issue, and I'm sure that in particular US courts in the future court cases around the domain names will have to revisit this issue. It was discussed partially during the famous Iran case when the few activists of the Iranian opposition requested ICANN to redelegate Iranian domain name, national domain name, to the people who lost their property after the change of the regime in Tehran. And there was discussion about if the domain name is a property or not, but it hasn't been concluded. At that case, the request, the legal claim was refused of the Iranian opposition movement, but that issue will be on the table. It's not theoretically resolved and it's not practically resolved yet. I'm sure that Richard can add a few points. Oh, there is a mic.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to stress another
Richard
point.
Hill.
Richard Hill speaking. I wanted to stress another point that Peter made. codes in question are the two-digit ISO country codes like CH. I mean, those are established by a private organization, which is ISO, which is non-governmental. I could see the governments would have a better case if they were talking about the three-letter codes, which are published by the UN, which is an intergovernmental organization, or the official country name. Has that come up? What happens if somebody tries to register Afghanistan.doctors, for example? That perhaps would be a more interesting discussion to have. Then I had a separate comment coming back to the CIA revelations. You're correct. One of the big things that was talked about is the fact that the CIA is apparently, allegedly stockpiling the information and not alerting the companies to get rid of it. Yeah. The other point that was made is that allegedly, again, they lost control of the stockpile. So the stockpile was actually out on the open market and available to ordinary cyber criminals and not just to espionage agents, which underscores the fact that even if you trust the government, you can't trust the government not to leak the information unwillingly because somebody inside the government decides they're going to make money by taking that out and leaking it. So it was allegedly they lost control before the leak. It wasn't the leak that caused the loss of control. It happened before that.
There was proto-leak. Yeah. Or mega leak or whatever.
Yeah, well, it wasn't leaked. They lost control, but that wasn't public knowledge. It's just people who were in the know were able to get that stuff on the black market, and then the revelations show that had happened.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have, Roxana, any comment, question from online followers?
Hello, also from the online participants. We have a very vivid discussion here with over 40 people joining from different parts of the world. Let me start with a quick update from Nigel. He's saying that in Copenhagen at the ICANN meeting, there was also a major discussion on privacy and data protection with guests from the EU and Council of Europe. And the main focus was on the implementation of the new European data protection regulation starting next May. And how it affects many players. That was also in focus in Copenhagen. And we had 3 different questions related to trends. The first one is an underlying question: how do we define critical infrastructure? The question comes from Vafa, and for her it's also important to look at data centers as part of this critical infrastructure. On the question of cyber diplomacy of China, we have Katerina commenting from the UK. I was wondering to what extent this is related to translation and differences in culture. Does it make a practical difference to use multi-party versus multi-stakeholder? And a third question from India, from Amrita, on developments regarding the EU asking social media companies to change terms. Do you foresee this development to have any impact on the social media companies changing their terms globally? If yes, what kind of changes should be expected? Thank you.
Good. Let me start with the first question about China. That could be related to the differences, but I don't think that this is lost in translation, because this was carefully translated, and it is signaling basically, yes, we are ready to have the other stakeholders around table, but we have to have it according to the slightly different rules than traditional multi-stakeholder approach. That's more or less the message of this document. I wouldn't say that there was the question of confusion. There is a question of the cultural context, probably in defining how far multi-stakeholders should and can participate in the meetings, but this is the topic for the different debate. The second question is critical infrastructure. This is true that critical infrastructure is nationally defined, and it's defined on the national level mainly by cybersecurity strategies. And there is no agreement what is a critical infrastructure. There are some academic discussion, what are the key points, whether just the cables that carry the let's say internet traffic, or is it critical infrastructure, the whole ICANN related, the system related to domain names, root servers, and the other part of the global internet system. What about data centers? This is a good point. Countries are defining it differently, and we can make a pointer. We can send a link in the follow-up to the briefing to the quite comprehensive survey of different definitions of the critical infrastructure worldwide, from China to the United States. And this is one of the debates at the UNGG, governmental group of experts. While there is agreement that the critical infrastructure shouldn't be attacked by by using national cyber capabilities, there is lack of agreement what is a critical infrastructure. Therefore, there is agreement that it should be in a way protected and excluded from any sort of cyber activities. But then the controversy starts when the issue is open about the scope of the critical infrastructure. Third point is about the EU. What we can learn clearly is that whatever is decided in Brussels and in the European Court of Justice in particular, it's carefully followed worldwide. And usually European Union is probably the only actor, apart from the US anti-monopoly authorities, that can challenge the power and position of the major internet companies. And it is not surprising that the major lobbyist of the strongest lobbyist capabilities of the internet companies are basically based in Brussels. Facebook has a big office, Apple has a big office, Google and other actors. Therefore, whatever is decided in Strasbourg or Luxembourg or Brussels is followed carefully worldwide. Right to be forgotten is one example, which then was copied in quite a few countries worldwide, recently Indonesia. And I'm sure that whatever decision is made on the change of the terms of the contracts, agreements between users and the social media companies will be basically copied by quite a few countries worldwide. Therefore, everybody is watching what's going on in Brussels and what will be outcome of the current dispute between the internet industry and the European Union authorities. And then it will have a definitely global impact. Okay. No comment. Well, that's if you don't have any comment, question here in the room, I would like basically to invite you who are here in Geneva to join us for the refreshment over there and for continuation of our discussion. Unfortunately, we cannot offer the refreshment online, but I invite you to stay connected and continue with the regional briefings. We'll have usual regional briefings for North Africa, Latin America, and Asia, coordinated by Stephanie Borg-Psaila, who is based in Malta. Thank you very much for our colleagues online, and thank you for you who joined us here in Geneva.
Thank you, Jovan, for the update, for all the developments from around the world, and thank you, Roxana, for moderating the chat. As Jovan announced, we will now listen to the updates from our hubs, but before that, a few reminders from my end. All the developments that Jovan talked about are on the observatory, so you'll find the developments listed according to the 43 issues that we follow, 43 issues plus 7 processes. So the observatory, I remind you about the link, is ditch.watch. There is also a dedicated page to the thematic reporting from ICANN 58, so you'll find all the reports there, and I'm going to type the page also, so it's ditch.watch/ICANN 58. You'll find the thematic reports there, and on Friday, being the last day of the month, we'll have the newsletter with all the trends, the barometer, and other analyses. And now we move on to the regional hubs. So the first update is from Tunisia. Mariam Kribi, I hope I pronounced that well, from the Tunis hub, will update us on the developments related to PayPal and e-payments in Tunisia. So over to you, Mariam.
So today I will talk about the issue of PayPal in Tunisia. Actually, the issue of PayPal started from 2015 when developers complained about blocking transactions through PayPal in Tunisia, even if this service was allowed all around the globe back to 1998. A nascent hope was kindled last September when the Central Bank of Tunisia sent a letter of comfort to the company PayPal asking for Tunisia's membership. Unfortunately, this request wasn't approved because of some legal restriction on our currency that seemed to block the process. PayPal has asked the Tunisian central bank to reformulate the letter of comfort in sense of accepting PayPal's offer without any restriction, including the funding through a PayPal account of another bank account opened abroad in the name of participant, which is actually prohibited under the current state of exchange legislations. The request of PayPal actually shed light on the loopholes that exist in the current legislative framework, and especially on Law 18 of 1976. The only proposition or solutions proposed by the central bank was to ask PayPal to reformulate a special treatment for Tunisia in order to allow repatriation in Tunisia of all the funds collected in the PayPal account. And users in Tunisia need to use PayPal with or without a debit or credit card, because it will make them, or it will enable them to solve so many problems. And of course, here I am talking about the e-commerce site, the Tunisian e-commerce sites, who can use PayPal as a payment option, and which will make them gain a lot of potential customers who are willing to pay their play money on these sites. Of course, in the end, we need to put emphasis on the need for new legislations that meet the aim of Tunisian citizens to open up to the e-commerce. Such legislations are considered to be an urgency, since we are unfortunately at the risk of missing the wave. So that's all for today's briefing. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye.
Thank you, Mariam, for the updates from Tunisia about the e-payments and in particular PayPal. We now move on to updates from Southeastern Europe. For those of you who are from the region or are interested in the region, there is an ongoing discussion in another room. And I'm sharing with you the link, so that leads you away from this room, but to follow and to participate in the discussion on Southeastern Europe development. At the same time, we have Vladimir Radunovic, who will share the updates in the video here. So that's over to you, Vlad.
Hello, good afternoon to the Geneva Global Briefing on Internet Governance from the Southeastern Europe. A few updates from March from Southeastern Europe, responding to the Romanian initiative to regulate the country code top-level domain, the .ro. Several stakeholders have raised a number of principles that the government should take into consideration. In Serbia, there was a leak of a document, possibly a public document, with over 400,000 personal data of citizens of Serbia, some of which might have also been used for political purposes. In Ukraine, the government is initiating putting up the list of websites which should be blocked because they undermine the sovereignty of the state, while Armenia has passed the law which provides incentives for IT business, in that sense boosting the internet companies and IT business in the country. There are more updates, but you can you're invited to consult with the newsletter, and the updates will be available on the website. Greetings from the Southeastern Europe.
Thank you, Vlada, for that update. And once again, a reminder for those who want to follow the discussion to move into the Southeastern Europe hub. From our end, that brings us to the end of the regional perspectives. The Brazil update will be uploaded on our website. So the recording, the presentation, and the digest, and the videos from the regional perspectives will all be on the website and will be shared with you after this briefing. Once again, thank you all for joining. See you again in April. The date is the 25th. The registrations are open, and we hope you can stay tuned to our web page dedicated to the newsletter, so you can download the March newsletter on the 35th. on the 31st. So thank you for joining and see you again in April.